Cool. Well, hi everybody. I'm here to do sort of a discography review for Jonathan Richman, which includes the Modern Lovers, Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. But I'm by far, as much of a fan as I am as Jonathan Richman, I think he's probably for me one of the, I would say, probably my favorite lyricist and one of my favorite artists of all time. But I wouldn't consider myself necessarily an expert in all the facts. So I think this discography will probably be mostly based around um, my relationship to the records, I think, and how they make me feel, which I think is good because Jonathan Richman talks a lot about notes and things not being the most important and where the feeling is the most important. So I think this will be kind of more in that vein. So yeah, let's get going. First of all, this is going to be a good one for the trolls right away, I think, is the first record, which Jonathan Richman doesn't even necessarily consider his first record. I think he just considers it a collection of demos. That record has slipped through my hands many, many times. So the one I'm going to be showing is actually the one that I had as a kid, which is the Roadrunner, what is it, Roadrunner Berserkly release. And that one has a few extra songs that were released a little later. So yeah, but let's get going. First of all, this record, Jonathan Richman never considers a first record. A lot of people call this first record, but I think most people probably consider it to be his first record, but he actually considers it to be just a collection of demos that he never even necessarily wanted released. You know, he listens to some of them and he says he sort of kind of grimaces at a little bit of those, at a few of those songs on there. He said, I think I have a really good quote here. It's like, it sounded like on that record, it was a guy not having a very good time and kind of having a hard time with himself, but like, it's mostly his fault. So it's him, he thinks of himself as kind of being a bratty little like insufferable teen on these records, which I think you do hear that. And I think for me as a young person, that record in particular was the first record that obviously really spoke to me. But I think as I get a little older and I have a little time with that record, like behind me, I don't quite relate to it as much. And I don't find that one on my turntable very often. But I think the song that really brought me in with that release was Hospital, because I think you hear within that song where he's going in his career a little bit later, where he's more concentrating on the feeling of the song, on the emotions more than the rockness of it. Because I think, you know, a lot of people, when you go to Jonathan Richman shows, ask for Roadrunner, which is a great song. And a few years ago, it actually, people are trying to petition that to be the national song, or not the national song, but the state song for Massachusetts, which ultimately went to Dream On by Aerosmith. So we can deal with that problem later on. But I think it is an appropriate song as a state song, but for me, Hospital, Girlfriend, in particular, are songs that are just like very hard on your sleeve, where you can start to see kind of, you know, where he's evolving as an artist away from rock and roll and things like that. So another great song on here, I really like Pablo Picasso, which John Cale ended up playing piano on, which is great. And the first Modern Lovers record is actually all the John Cale sessions, I believe, which were recorded in 1972, but this record actually didn't come out until 1976. So, and I think part of that problem was Jonathan Richman kind of arguing with the band in like the kind of direction they wanted to go. And I think they had done a residency in Bermuda, and he started getting into more acoustic music and more like softer music and kind of happier music, and he didn't feel like he wanted to be like go through like this kind of more depressive music. But I do love the record, and that leads us to what's considered maybe the second record, which he also does not really consider his second record, is the original Modern Lovers. Let's see, can you see that? Yeah, cool. The original Modern Lovers was a collection put out by Bomp, which was like a small sort of indie rock, punk rock label in Los Angeles. And those were the other half of the recordings from those original sessions, which I believe was done by, well, oh yeah, Kim Fowley. So these were but Jonathan Richman actually calls this record a lie. He says this record was, on the back in the liner notes, which are really hilarious, this record is not recorded when they say it was recorded. And so Jonathan Richman has a problem with that. And he actually has a funny little liner note on the back. They actually printed his letter to the people at Bomp Records and said, like, yeah, basically the record's a lie. It wasn't recorded when it was. He also had a problem with calling it the original Modern Lovers because it wasn't the original Modern Lovers lineup at all. So he actually called these guys from Bomp Records cute little creeps from LA, which I thought was funny. And I do have a clip in a playlist that you'll see below that actually has an interview with him calling these people cute little creeps, which I thought was hilarious. Alrighty, put this down. Let's see. There's a couple other sort of bootlegs and things that came out around that time too, and I'm not really a fan of the bootlegs. They're just, usually the recordings are, not that I care that they're poor, because I actually like sort of more lo-fi kind of punk rock recordings. They're just not my bag to collect. I think I try to keep with the originals. But Jonathan Richman actually did talk about one live album that came out that actually sounded like it really sounded when they were young. So, and that is called Modern Lovers, Precise Modern Lovers Order, which is on CD. I don't think this ever came out on vinyl, but it's got 17 songs on it, and they're all live, like recorded in places like Harvard and the Fenway and places like that. So I think these songs are great. And one of the funny things that Jonathan Richman said about this one is that, like, yeah, it does sound exactly like us, which actually sounds poor. They sounded horrible. He actually doesn't like the way those records sound. So yeah. Yeah, let's move on. And this is kind of, we're coming up to the records that he started putting out as his own lineup with Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. This is kind of post all this stuff, all the rock and roll stuff. And so this is the first in a series of the Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lover records that I've spent the most time with, and I actually consider to be my favorite 10, maybe some like top 10 records of all time. So this is the first one in that series, which is called Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. And this has a song on it called New England, which I think is probably one of those, like, it's one of the most special, most amazing songs I've ever heard. It's got such a nice, like, doo-woppy rock and roll sound, which is, I think a lot of people ended up calling him punk, or that early stuff being, you know, pre-punk, which he never really considered himself punk at all. Like, even those Modern Lovers records get a lot of, I think a lot of people talk about those records being early punk rock, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. I guess critics are right or critics are wrong, but you can kind of take it how you feel. But this has Rockin' Shopping Center, which I think is really funny because this is where some of his humor starts coming through. The other records were very like brooding and sort of kind of feelings, you know, sort of feeling sorry for himself and kind of feeling that people have done him wrong a little bit, especially women. And so this is the stuff where I think he starts kind of becoming more himself. And like I said, New England's really good. And what else? Back in the USA is a great song. Amazing Grace. There's a solo cover of Amazing Grace on here that's absolutely fabulous. So I highly recommend this record. And this record was recorded in 1976. So it came out right around the same time that Berserkly released those early demos, which became that Modern Lovers record. Yeah. And this one, which I love, I mean, obviously I love all these records, but this is Rock and Roll with the Modern Lovers. As you can see in the label right here, this was actually a promo. So, and I think, oh, it doesn't have the cut corner. But yeah, this was like a promo that they would send out either to radio stations or record stores to kind of play in the store for promos. Jonathan Richman has a good thing that he says about this one. He talks about this record kind of being the only rock and roll record that was recorded with all acoustic instruments. And so you'll hear that. I mean, it's like a really rockin', boppin' album, but stand-up bass, acoustic guitar, yeah, minimal drum kit, which I really love. And that kind of leading him into kind of what he does now, which is really stripped down, just him and Tommy Larkin, you know. And that's, as I get older, I really, really tend to find myself more gravitating towards that stuff. What's on here? Ice Cream Man, which I think he gets a lot of flack early on from critics around this time because he starts doing songs like that are very like childlike. So you do I'm a Little Dinosaur and all these things like that. Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round. And I think now he even kind of thinks like, oh, I really was being a nerd back then. But I actually find this stuff very endearing and I love it a lot. So, and plus look at the cover. Look at little JoJo. Yeah, that's a good one. Next we have, sorry, I should have taken these out of the sheets ahead of time, but you got to show all like the record collecting trolls that I do keep them in plastic, my friend. Because that's of course really important because you never want to play the record, you just want to look at it. So, but this is Modern Lovers Live. And if you can see, Jonathan Richman has this really cute half shirt on here, which I love. The back is amazing, kind of giving like drummer with a little new wave look. But he actually likes this record. I read in an interview, but his main problem with it is it doesn't sound like a live record. It didn't really sound how they sounded back then because they used professional recording equipment to record it. But I actually find it like, I think the tone's really good. It's actually for me I don't normally like live records. Like usually like I'll buy them, especially if I love something like you look live record and you really want to listen. I'm not a fan. So, but this record does sound like a nice live record to me. And it has I'm a Little Dinosaur, which I love, South American folk songs. So it's a lot of those songs from that first new iteration of the Modern Lovers. So yeah, I highly recommend this record too. It's not cheap, but if you can find it, pick it up. And this record actually has a lot of nice history just for me personally. Back in Your Life, Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, which I love. It's got a painting by him on the back, which I think is amazing. Sorry for the reflection. But I got in an argument with my partner in, I don't know, mid-90s sometime. And it was sort of a wicked argument, but she brought me home this record after being gone for a day and a half and brought this record home as an apology gift. And so for me, I'll always think of that, but it also has one of the most amazing love songs of all time called Back in Your Life. And so it's a song basically where he's talking about wanting to do everything with his partner, wanting to know everything about her past. And so, you know, there's an amazing lyric when he's like talking about wanting to help your dad with the maple syrup as he's making pancakes. And so to me, that's like a classic sort of Jonathan Richman style lyric. There's some really good doo-woppy stuff on here, which I love. This Abdullah and Cleopatra song is really amazing on here. Yeah, Buzz, Buzz, Buzz with the honeybee. It's just, this record from both sides is just totally listenable over and over again. Love it, love it, love it. Which leads us to this next record, which Jonathan Richman actually says he hates. He says it's embarrassing to listen to, but which is disappointing for me because I actually love this album, which I love all the albums, so that's easy to say. Jonathan Richman Sings. Plus, look at this painting, another Jonathan Richman painting, which I love. But this song has Summer Feeling. And Summer Feeling, to me, is Jonathan Richman's best song lyrically, because there's never been a song I think I've ever heard in my life that can bring you back to your childhood so vividly. This song just, it's long and it just grooves the whole time, and it just takes you from the beginning to the end in such an amazing sort of emotional way that I feel like it's hard to get out of music sometimes, you know. This actually isn't the original, or this is the original version, which I don't like as much as the one that's on I, Jonathan, but it's still just such an amazing song. Yeah, and this, a lot of doo-wop. Stop the Car, I think, is good. Stop the Car is a song where he talks about like trying to get out of a car of a friend who's been drinking and driving too fast. So you don't hear that in a rock and roll album, like let me out of the car, I'm like not into this drinking stuff. So I always like that too, like his sort of approach to being straight, you know, straight as in no drugs, no alcohol, that kind of thing. So And around that same time, they released a 7-inch for that summer feeling, which I think, which is another painting by Jonathan Richman. And it matches the lyrics so well. It's this gas station with like a Heinz root beer, Hires root beer here on the side. And there's just something about it to me that just, it's like his song. It's like a painting created from the song. It's really beautiful. Cool. Let's see. Rockin and Romance. And these records, these are all in the series of the Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. They're the records that I most definitely had to have on vinyl. To me, they're like, I went high and low to find these, so I'm happy to be showing them off. Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, Rockin and Romance, which I think is amazing. Look at this. Love the cover. This has The Beach, which is one of my favorite songs as well, which is, I guess all these songs are my favorite songs if I had to be serious here, but The Beach is another one of those songs where it just kind of gives you that feeling of being outside and being energetic and being young, you know? And so like all these records just make you feel so youthful. And for me, as I get a little older and kind of get farther away from sort of youthful, wild energy, these records will still bring me back there, which I think is lovely. This has Walter Johnson on it, which is an old, early 20th century baseball player. So that's another funny thing. He talks right before that as Vincent van Gogh. So not only is he talking about, you know, early 20th century baseball players, he's also talking about modern artists. He's talking about UFOs on here. He's talking about I'm Just Beginning to Live, where he's already starting to feel a little bit older and trying to hold on to that youthfulness, because that's one of the things that he kind of, as he goes farther into his discography, I think, he starts feeling farther away from that and is trying to sort of bring himself back into that and make himself kind of feel within that space again. But I like this albums too, where he started feeling more comfortable with getting older, which I think we all should. Next record, Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, It's Time For. And out of all the records, whoop, whoop, backwards. Out of all the records that I've shown so far, I know I talk about how much I love them all, which I do. But if I was really like hard pressed to say if you could keep one Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers record, it would probably be this one. Not only on the first side does it have a song called It's You, which is kind of, for me, like one of the most sort of believable romantic songs I've ever heard, but it's also, again, like very, very youthful. And on the second side, the first song is probably my favorite song outside of Summer Feeling, and it's a song called Corner Store. And basically it's a song talking about his corner store being taken over, sort of gentrification, kind of being torn down for like probably a 7-Eleven, a mall or something like that. And he's like, there's an amazing lyric where he talks about, I don't care if it costs more money to shop there, you know, this is love, this place is love, this building is love, this business is love. And this is, I have such a connection to older buildings and older things like this, like especially with so much in the West sort of disappearing these days, where there used to be times where you could drive the Grapevine, you could drive the 5, and you'd have long stretches of nothing. And now it's like slowly, as we all know, it's kind of becoming one Valencia after another. So it's like strip mall, strip mall, strip mall. And yeah, a love song to a corner store, to me, is basically what it's all about. He also does a song about getting a chocolate malted at Woolworths, which I think is like pretty worth listening to, pretty funny. Talks about like, well, if you make it right, maybe I'll give you a tip or something, which I think is pretty funny. This is, what do we got here? I got some notes on here. Let's see. This is Modern Lovers 88, which I think is actually like a pretty good rockin' album. He's playing saxophone on here. Also, again, this, which I can almost guarantee this is Elko, Nevada. I think I've stayed at this hotel. I'm afraid to look at the liner notes to like make myself a liar, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say that this is hotel in Elko. And this is where he becomes a trio, which I really love this trio sound, just like the acoustic nylon strings, the small, just stand-up drum kit and like guitar. Such a beautiful, beautiful sound. It's got Dancing Late at Night, which to me, feeling sweaty, dancing. He's always talking about heat and sort of being hot and liking that feeling of being hot, you know, which I kind of do too. There's also When Harpo Plays His Harp, which a love song to Harpo Marx, I think is a wonderful, beautiful thing, because I think there's plenty of interviews, which we could also link down to, of Jonathan Richman kind of doing his Harpo Marx impression to interviewers, which I think is funny. And also another great thing about this record, if you're a collector nerd, which I don't know if I consider myself that, but definitely like stuff like this. Let's get it out of here. So this was a promo record. So it actually came with a promo 8x10 of little baby JoJo, which I think is beautiful. Also, this big write-up of Rounder telling you how great Jonathan Richman is and why you should buy this record, why you should put him on tour, which I think is hilarious. And then followed up by photocopied interviews in Spin magazine from the mid-'80s in French in some of it, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, it's amazing that there was a time where this is how you promote somebody. You would have some letter by Jonathan Richman where he does a little drawing at the bottom, a little type. I can scan all this stuff too, maybe put it on my website. You can download it if you want. But yeah, promo stuff just seems so ridiculous to me and funny, especially coming from Jonathan Richman, who doesn't seem like he cares too much about it, you know? Coming up next is Jonathan Richman's first solo record. I think all those Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers records are solos, but this is truly where he's just using his name. Yeah, what is the name of this record again? I think it's just Jonathan Richman. Yeah, Jonathan Richman, self-titled. Love the photo. Action Packed. Oh yeah, you want a better image of that. Action Packed, another like let's get up and move kind of jam. Everyday Clothes, which there's never been a romantic songwriter, in my opinion, that's as real and as realistic about writing romantic songs as Jonathan Richman. Very hard on the sleeves. So this song called Everyday Clothes, which is him and his wife getting ready to go out, and she's asking like, what should I wear? And he's basically just wear what you wear every day. And so it's talking about wearing a t-shirt, cut off shorts. And it's like, it's pretty amazing to me to write a love song about your wife, about just being exactly who you are every day, which I like a lot. He does a cover of Blue Moon on here, which I think is super amazing. Eat with Gusto. So when I first heard these records, I think I was kind of annoyed by some of this, like the poetry. So I Eat with Gusto, damn, you bet. So it's like him basically like, he's kind of like sort of beat poetry about eating. And the first time I heard it, I sort of had no time for it, but as I've gotten older, I think I really appreciate it. He does a cover of Sleepwalk on here, which I think is amazing. Yeah, this is a good one. I mean, they're all good ones, like I said a million times. This is where we start getting into CDs, because a lot of this other stuff is sort of expensive on vinyl. And I'm not willing to pay almost $100 for this record, which is Jonathan Richman Sings Country, which this record is bonkers. It's pretty funny to hear, like, it's a lot of his older songs, and there are some covers, but it's like doing like one of my favorite songs, Corner Store, country. So he has like actually some Nashville session players on this one who play slide guitar, drums, and things like that. So yeah, Corner Store as a country song is just heartbreaking. There's a song about his wife beginning to ride horses, which I thought, and like Reno is one of the best songs. And also like, what's the best song on here though? You're Crazy for Taking the Bus, which if you've never heard this song, it's probably one of the best country songs ever written. Yeah, talking about like, you know, not wanting to fly on an airplane, taking the Greyhound so his guitar will be right next to him. But all the crazy stories he gets into. And next we have, I'm actually really proud of this one because it came from the library. So we'll have to get maybe a better image of it. But this is Having a Party with Jonathan Richman. And this kind of came around the same time as that Modern Lovers 88 era. So it's a lot of party anthems, but again, just doo-woppy, dancey, 4 on the floor, but you know, mostly acoustic instruments. There's an amazing song on here, When I Say Wife, which basically talks about thinking the word wife is sort of disgusting. And like, but he can't think of another word to use. Like, because if he says if you had to say lover every day, you'd begin to gag. So there's no better word, but that's like the most appropriate word, which I like that song a lot. Monologue About Bermuda is a track that he has that song on an older, Down in Bermuda, he has on an older album. But this one, he's sort of updated of him doing it live, and he kind of goes through the story of why he left the Modern Lovers in the first place and started doing more like, calypso music and things like that, and kind of getting into sort of more world music. And it's one of the funniest monologues I ever heard. He's like a stand-up comedian, and it's pretty funny. Excuse me. Next we have, when I started getting into these records, I've lived with these records a lot, but I actually don't know a whole lot about how they were made. But this is the record here, Surrender to Jonathan, this is where you start sort of hearing more of his sort of Spanish influence. He starts speaking in Spanish, he starts singing in French and kind of like exploring other languages. It started really getting into flamenco guitar and things like that. So you start hearing like a definite change in what he's doing. And I think this is a really interesting turning point in his career. Just to sort of hear him mature, to me, was so nice and almost like weirdly reassuring to hear Jonathan Richman, who was obviously very youthful and always about movement, always about being on the move, but also like into being domestic and into just being into his family and things like that. So I really love that. Does it look weird with me coming down like this? Okay. This is Jonathan Richman, I'm So Confused, which I'm confused every time I put this up to the camera. I feel like I'm my mom. Yeah. But this probably has his most famous song. Like, if you're going to get recommended a Jonathan Richman song on Spotify, this has I Was Dancing in a Lesbian Bar, which I think is super funny, super jumpy. The first time I ever heard this, I was actually watching him at a venue in West Hollywood called what was it? The Mint. Yeah, and he just got the crowd moving. It's just funny to think about him accidentally walking into a lesbian bar and getting turned on to dancing. It's pretty great. This has a lot of like heavy drums on it, surprisingly. There's like True Love Is Not Nice, which I think is another sort of realistic love song, where this idea that as much as we feel so much for love, when you really realize that you're in the perfect relationship, it's not always nice. There's things that like people you're in love with through no fault of their own sometimes can make you just feel so heartbroken. So I think the idea of true love not being nice, like when you find the right person is when you feel the most strife in some ways, I don't know if I can believe that wholeheartedly, but I really do like that idea of being honest about love songs. This, Her Mystery, Not of High Heels and Eyeshadow. Yeah. Another one in the back, it's got his painting, which I love. Yeah. There's a song called like Vampire Girl on here, which I think is really amazing. Like it's kind of gothy a little bit, which I like. There's a song called Give Paris One More Chance on here, which I think is another great love song to a city, to a place where it's, even though that you've heard so many bad things about this place, sometimes it feels like it's snooty, sometimes it's this or that. Like walking through the city and feeling the breeze and the warmth of the air can make you love a place. And I think like that's one of the things I like about this one. Really sets the place. So some of these, where is this? I actually had a hard time finding copies of some of these. I mean, I still have the CD in a CD holder in my car, but I have no idea where the covers are. So I downloaded the covers on my iPad. I don't know. I think record collecting trolls are not going to like this, but I think it's funny. Can you see that? I, Jonathan, which to me, this is kind of, when I was in my mid-20s, this is the one that really like jump-started me on his older records. Not older records as in records in the past, but records of him maturing. This has the best version of Summer Feeling on it, which I really, really highly recommend, just sitting with that song for a little while. But yeah, it's just, he creates such this amazing sort of, I wouldn't call it a concept record, but it does go through kind of living when he was younger to living when he was older and sort of like collecting all that past, you know? And so that's a good record to listen to. They're all good records to listen to again, so. Jonathan Richman, You Must Ask the Heart. Sorry, record trolls. Another copy. This has the song Just Because I'm Irish, which is a song that he wrote backstage with Julia Sweeney before they went on the Conan O'Brien show together. And she actually records the vocals with him on this. And basically it's like, just because I'm Irish, I don't know every Irish bar in New York. And so it's a song about like men coming up to Julia Sweeney all the time, like, oh, you're Irish, you must know every Irish bar in New York. She's like, actually, no, I don't. And it's like this very like funny sort of back and forth. It's almost like a comedy record or something, you know? Let's see, this is so silly. And this is the record, Because Her Beauty is Raw and Wild, Jonathan Richman. This is definitely a very like, that one's not gonna, let's see. Well, we'll just post it later. I saw him at the Mint when he did that record. And I was kind of blown away because I went expecting definitely more upbeat songs. And I think a lot of people in the audience were were requesting like modern lover songs, like Roadrunner, which no matter when you see him, even if you see him now at like in his 60s, it's so funny. People with just an acoustic guitar, people will still request Roadrunner, which I think is funny. I think it's okay to just kind of leave that song in the past. It's an amazing song, but I love his new stuff. I think an artist like Jonathan Richman, when they start so youthful and they have this kind of post-punk or pre-punk background, people want that from him the rest of his life. And I think I did this a lot when I was young. I had a really hard time with liking artists at a younger time in my life and their records sort of becoming more mature and becoming a different thing. And I think I had such a problem with that as a younger person now, but this was the first record I really feel like I turned around on that, where I was just like, no, I want more of this. Like, I want the older perspective. And I don't know if that was because for me, I was leaving my 20s and kind of coming into my 30s, which now seems ridiculous to even think of being like older. But yeah, he was singing songs about, one of my favorites on here is The Lovers Are Here and They're Full of Sweat. So it's about being an older man and seeing like these young couples with just staying at hostels and just sweaty, but how much that's exciting and how much he loves that still, you know, but he's not part of that. But I think the crown jewel on this record is As My Mother Lay Lying, which is a song about his mom dying in a nursing home. So just the visuals that he paints as he goes in and he's sitting in this room with his mother as she's slowly passing away and noticing, just kind of becoming like skin and bones, but like the light still looking very beautiful on her face, and just watching, like trying to listen to as much as she says before she passes away and leaves the earth. And that song always made me super emotional, but I lost my, sorry. I lost my mother a few years ago in like a pretty tragic accident. And as sad as this song is, kind of describing the death of an ailing mother, an aging mother, like for me, like I found so much solace and like comfort in it, because I felt like it was like such an amazing, truthful feeling of how you feel when you're losing somebody so close to you, especially your mother, like that, like trying to sort of get as much information as you can from them before they go. And so for me, like, I don't know if there's a better song about death that's ever been written. You know, I like a lot of country songs, like I like a lot of Johnny Cash and a lot of these like really sort of poetic and um, overly emotional kind of country songs. I think they're beautiful, but like something to have, because I like to cry. Like I actually get into it, and I like music that makes me cry, and Jonathan Richman does that a lot. So I find it very therapeutic, but I don't know if there's a more truthful song about death than that song. So I think that's why that album will definitely always be one of my favorites from him. That was in my car on heavy rotation for 2 years straight after I saw him play that album. So pick that one up. I think it's great. This one was the follow-up to this album. It's called O Moon. And this is sort of like a very quiet record. I think a lot of his records around this time as he gets older are quiet, but they feel very sea shanty. And I also like, again, like going to my own personal relationship with this music, you know. I'm not so excited about a lot of the facts. So even in the beginning part where we talk about the original Modern Lovers album, like I had to do research and realize that I didn't know a lot about like just the technical aspects of how he made records or how he got to where he is. It's almost like he's so mythical, like it didn't really matter to me. But I think it is interesting to know some of those facts, and I'm happy that I do now. But yeah, so I have like a heavy connection with visuals of the sea. And so this album is sort of very like a lot of sea shanties kind of feeling songs, like very like 3/4 kind of waltzy, but also very open and sparse. And so a lot of open guitar chords. There's not a lot of like, whereas like before he's like such a lover of rock and roll, there's a lot of like four on the floor, heavy stuff. Not heavy, that's not really the word, but poppy, dancey. But this album really is just, I like to put this album on when I go to sleep. So it's kind of a very like soothing, there's no sounds of ocean. Like I listened to it just recently again, just to see if this was the case, but there was no actual sounds of ocean sounds, no foghorns, no boats, no nothing like that. But like, I remember it like that just because of the way his guitar playing is, the way he flows with it is very, it's like the motion of the sea. It's like very connected, I think, to the earth, which I think is great. And then yeah, calling it O Moon, like kind of, and another beautiful painting by him, which I actually am such a huge fan of his paintings. But yeah, the shadowing, it's just, the painting feels like the record, which I love a lot. And you'll hear me say that, I'm sure, a lot, that I love a lot of this stuff, because I do. Like, I think for me, Jonathan Richman is by far my favorite artist, not just musically, but also the way he speaks, the way his poetry, his paintings, just his aloofness even, you know what I mean? This kind of not giving too many people interviews and kind of keeping that sort of, that privacy a little bit. Like there's something about that that makes it feel even more special when you get a glimpse of it. And I do like that. And so I try to see him every time he tours as much as I can. And he actually lives in Chico, California now, Northern California, and his family owns a movie theater. So you can go to this movie theater and sometimes he's taking tickets. So if you want to invade his privacy a little bit, maybe that might be for you. Let's see, we're kind of coming to the end here of, there's, like I said, there's bootlegs, there's 7 inches, which I do have some of that stuff, but I kind of wanted to concentrate on the records. So let's see. This is Jonathan Richman, Ishkore. This is a dark one, so it might be hard to see. And Ishkore is a Native American word for fire. I believe it's like the Chippewa people of Canada and northern part of the United States. And so this album feels very spiritual. It feels like in the beginning, you feel like, again, I listened to the record just to see if this did or didn't exist. Sounds of Fire, which it doesn't. Obviously, with the title, it makes it feel like that a little bit. But yeah, this has like such a nice sort of meditative feel. I think he's using Native American languages, but he's still also using Spanish. And the record is very sparse and it's very like, it's not, I wouldn't consider it bright, but um, it's bright in its sort of, on the low end of brightness, I guess. I don't know, like that's the best way I could describe it. But he does a song called "Oh Sun," which this is 5 years after "Oh Moon," so it's kind of, this is a record kind of talking about the brightness and kind of him sort of becoming a little bit more aware that, I mean, he's obviously probably not dying anytime soon, but he knows that now he's in his mid 60s, that like, how much farther do you have to go at this point? And so it's like very like reflective of where he is with the earth. And sort of, I was watching an interview with him recently and he talks about how much he loved classical music and music of India and all these places, and just wanted to express himself like that, but didn't really have the sort of musical language to do that, and sort of like self-training himself in new scales and things like that to kind of um, give you this feel of yeah, an aging shaman or something. I don't know, it kind of feels like that. And that'll bring us to his most recent record, which is a record called Saw. Can you see that? Cool. um, this was actually produced partially by him, his wife, and also one of the original members of the Modern Lovers, who was also in the Talking Heads. Um, yeah, Jeffrey Harrison. He was in the Modern Lovers. He was in the Talking Heads. I think he might have also been in a band called the Real Kids, which is like an early pre-Talking Heads kind of New York punk band. But the title is Saw, S-A, and Saw is the first root note in Indian raga music. So it's kind of like the spiritual beginning of music. And I think that's what he's trying to do here with this record, is really trying to sort of, as he is getting older and finding a new connection to sort of more open music and more like out of the structures of the pentatonic scale and things like that, going more towards, like you said, these Indian raga scales. And he's using a lot of things like sort of droning, like Indian droning instruments and things like that. So this has a very like drony, flowy kind of, no verse, no chorus, just kind of like a feeling from beginning to end, which I love about Indian music too. And I was really able to sort of pick up on that and do it in like a very Jonathan Richman way. So, yeah. So I think that leads me to the end. That's his newest record. So hopefully he's got some other things coming out soon. But yeah, I think just once again, like there's nobody who makes me feel through art and music the way that Jonathan Richman does. Like I definitely love and sadness and all these things. Like none of these things can exist without the other. And like he has a way of just sort of bringing those all together and kind of really, really taking you on an emotional roller coaster in a very good way. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.